Hi again, it's me. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about how to produce a good sound. Now, if you haven't watched the first two videos, I would recommend doing so because having good posture form and a good bow hold will only help you produce a good sound. So let me ask you, how would you describe a good sound? Right? What are some characteristics of a good sound? Well, number one, it needs to be clear, right? It can't be scratchy or crunchy. Number two, it needs to be resonant. And number three, possibly it needs to be consistent. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, let me explain something to you first. If you look at horsehair under a microscope, what you will see are these things that stick out, these prickly things that stick out. And so when you draw the bow across the string, those things are plucking the string many times per second. So logically, you would want as much of that to happen. You want the prickly things to pluck the string as much as possible. So how do we do that? Well, number one, I would use more hair, right? So using all the hair, flat bow hair, is just generally going to give you a big, broad sound. Okay. Number two, you want to make sure your bow is traveling in a straight line next to the bridge. So sometimes your teacher will say, make sure your bow is straight. Basically, what he or she is saying is, your bow has to be parallel to the bridge. Okay. Parallel to the bridge, perpendicular to the string. You get the idea, yes? Okay, so now how did I do that? You always have to think about moving from a joint. When you play the violin, you're always moving from a joint. This is why flexibility is so important. So I'm placing my bow on the A string. Look at my right elbow, it's bent. I'm opening the elbow to go to the tip, and now I'm going to close the elbow and follow through all the way to the frog. That's all I did. Open and close the elbow. Open, close. Another way to think about this is you're pulling the string and you're pushing the string. So, I just showed you how it's important for the bow to be straight and for you to use all the hair for a clear, resonant sound. Another thing that you have to make sure that you're doing is keeping the bow in the contact point or the sounding point. And that would be right in between the bridge and the F hole, right there. So if you play close to the fingerboard, perhaps under your ear, that may sound big enough, but in a big hall, that's not really going to carry. Okay? So you don't want to play. You want to play here in the sounding point. Okay? So I call this zone 1, which is right by the bridge. Now, we go there only when we need to play with maximum sound. Okay? And then about an inch away, that would be zone 2. This is zone 3, zone 4. You know, sometimes we have to go to zone 4 when we play an orchestra and you have to play triple piano. Now, that's where I would play. But generally speaking, you want your bow to travel around zone 2, zone 3, in that area. And again, the bow has to be straight, parallel to the bridge. Another thing that I want to talk about is string crossings. Okay, so you know, some students have trouble with string crossings, and it's mostly because they're not aware of which joint to move from. Some people think it's the wrist, and you know, sometimes you do, but usually you have to think about moving the shoulder for the string crossings. The shoulder. So, on the E string, you would not want your elbow to be up here. That's very, very awkward, and obviously that's not a very good sound. Your elbow should be relaxed, And remember, you're working with the shoulder. Okay? So my elbow wasn't too high. In general, this should be straight. Just as I was talking about in the other video, how this has to be straight from your elbow all the way to your knuckles. It's also true for the right arm. So on the A string, so look, E string, A string, my elbow is a little bit higher, and that's because I'm moving this way. Okay, so you can also think of this movement, like look at the bow, it looks like a seesaw. This is the G string, this is the E string, the A string, the D string. So the elbow travels generally with the wrist. You know, so you're moving, if you move from the shoulder, then you won't have all this funny business, right? So you just want to relax and make sure you just have direct contact with the string. You just place the bow on the string, open the elbow, close the elbow, pull and push. Open, close. So the sound was clear and resonant. So how do you keep the sound consistent? That was one of the characteristics of a good sound. Excuse me. Well, I would say that has to do with the weight of your arm. The weight of the arm will help you keep the sound consistent from frog to tip. Now, I don't like using the word pressure because that just means you have to work harder, right? And we don't want to work harder. We want to work less. And what does that mean? Your right arm should kind of feel like a dead weight. And when it's dead weight, you're more relaxed. So you're putting dead weight, or not completely dead, but your weight into the string. And what you're doing is letting that weight transfer from the pinky at the frog all the way to the index finger at the tip. That way I don't decrescendo every time I go to the tip and crescendo when I go to the frog. So again, if you want your sound to be clear, resonant, and consistent, those are the things that you should consider when you practice. Okay, so I hope that was helpful. And so until next time.